So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Women in Planning Lunch Bites webinar today. My name is Mandy Gill, and I am a solicitor at Irwin Mitchell Solicitors in the real estate team, and also the proud chair of Women in Planning West Midlands Committee. Today's session is led by the Self-Sabotage Coach, Tanya Sturges. It's so lovely to see so many attendees today, and it's clear that today's topic resonates with so many people. Imposter syndrome is stopping so many of us from putting ourselves forward for that promotion, making us overlook our achievements and procrastinate due to fear of failure. Tanya is going to provide us with tips on how we can overcome imposter syndrome and fulfill our potential. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Women in Planning YouTube channel if you would like to revisit the slides or watch the session again. If you have any questions, please do note them in the chat function. They are private, so only me and Tanya will see them. So if we have time at the end, I will pick them up. Otherwise, more than likely, we will just contact you after the event and have a discussion. I will now hand over to Tanya.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Mandy. So welcome everyone to the 7 secret habits you need to ditch to overcome imposter syndrome. My name is Tanya Sturges and I am a fully qualified transformational life coach. In terms of my background, I've actually got a psychology background from way back when, about 20 years plus, and then I went to work in HR and recruitment within the property and legal sectors. So I do have some understanding of the planning industry. I became a coach in 2017, and since then I've coached hundreds of men and women worldwide. And most importantly, I am an imposter syndrome survivor. So you're in the right place today if your fears and doubts are holding you back from going forward for that new job or promotion because you don't feel you're good enough. You hold back your ideas and don't speak up in meetings because you don't value your experience and expertise. You'll be saying things to yourself like, what do I know? Why should anyone listen to me? You're very self-critical and constantly put yourself down for every tiny little mistake that you make, using those mistakes as evidence that you are not good enough. Or you might overthink everything and are constantly comparing yourself to others, thinking everyone else is better than you. And I've got a brilliant story to tell you about comparison later on in this presentation. So what's my promise to you today? I will deliver as much of my knowledge, experience and expertise as I can during this short 45-minute presentation. This is not a sales pitch, although Mandy has given me permission to briefly outline how you can work with me at the end. I'm also going to be very vulnerable and share my story with you about my own imposter syndrome. Everything I teach in this presentation is all proven to work and methods that I have used with my clients over the last 4 years. So what am I going to talk about? I'll start off by giving you a run through of what actually is imposter syndrome. Then I'm going to share with you my story. Then I'm going to get to the bit about the 7 secret habits you need to ditch to overcome imposter syndrome. And finally, just a quick how you can work with me. All I ask in return is you keep an open mind about the new information you're going to learn today. I like to think that I look at imposter syndrome in a slightly different way to other people, so hopefully you will learn from that. I just ask that you respect the confidentiality of all the attendees as we share this safe space together. If you could keep your microphone on mute and ask any questions in the comments, that would be really helpful. And we've got quite a lot of attendees today, so we'll do our best if you do ask questions to come back to you during the session. If not, we'll come back to you afterwards if you want to leave your contact details. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome? In simple terms, imposter syndrome is the feeling that you are a fraud, that everyone is better than you and you will get found out soon. The phrase actually came from the 1970s when two researchers, Pauline and Suzanne, came up with the term imposter phenomenon, but it then evolved over the years to be known as imposter syndrome. Whilst it's called a syndrome, it's not actually a medical disorder. Imposter syndrome is a feeling from deep within us. Imposter syndrome is more than just self-doubt. We all have doubts that come and go throughout our minds every day, but the key with self-doubt is that it comes and goes. Imposter syndrome is more of a persistent feeling that stays with you. It's that feeling that your achievements are not deserved. It's got its roots in self-worth as well as self-doubt. Research shows that 70% of the population have experienced imposter syndrome at some point in their career. I actually believe that this figure is probably a lot higher, but the remaining 30% either don't know what imposter syndrome is or don't realise that they have it. So the key point here is that it's very, very common and it's totally normal to feel this way. A few quotes for you here from some celebrities who have experienced imposter syndrome. I love this quote from Emma Watson because I think it describes perfectly what imposter syndrome is. She says, "Now when I receive recognition for my acting, I feel incredibly uncomfortable. I tend to turn in on myself. I feel like an imposter. Any moment someone's going to find out I'm a total fraud and that I don't deserve any of what I've achieved." We have one here from an author. "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everyone and they're going to find me out." And even Meryl Streep has experienced some imposter syndrome. Okay, so my story. I am an imposter syndrome survivor. I suffered with imposter syndrome all of my life. Today is International Day of the Girl. You might have seen on social media there's a hashtag going about "this little girl is me." So I wanted to share a little picture of me, that's me, and my experience of imposter syndrome as a child. That was my first day of primary school. I was a very quiet and shy child. I didn't have many friends. I was bullied throughout all of my years at school. I didn't realise when I was that age that it was okay to be different. I had a very unique dress sense. I loved being a girl. I loved having my pigtails. I loved being a child and dressing like a child. And I remember going to the end of year prom in a very childlike dress when all my peers were wearing mini skirts and sequins tops. And I remember being bullied for what was deemed as being a childlike dress. That little girl in pigtails now knows that it's okay to be yourself. In fact, it's better to be yourself. It makes you happier. It makes you free. I also experienced chronic imposter syndrome during my corporate career. This is when I worked within HR and recruitment. I was in my early 20s and I remember being promoted quite significantly up a couple of ranks to regional HR officer at the time. And I moved from London to Manchester and I had a very big role with lots of responsibility. And as part of that role, I was required to attend board meetings. And in those board meetings, there were about 12 other directors, predominantly men, and everyone was significantly a lot older than me. I had chronic imposter syndrome. I used to go into those board meetings and I was a nervous wreck. I would start sweating profusely. I'm one of those people that when I'm nervous, the sweat comes out of all of my pores. You cannot hide it. It's absolutely everywhere, dripping from my forehead. I would go bright red. I just want the ground to swallow me up. I had no idea what half the people in the boardroom were talking about. I was very much learning on the job. It was very much a crash course in HR. And I really, really wanted to make a success of this job. It was a big opportunity for me. And I thought, I need to get over this. How am I going to get over this? I can't keep going into these board meetings and just turning into a shell of myself. Not only that, the night before the board meeting, I wouldn't sleep. I'd be up all night worrying about it. And then the following night after the board meeting, I'd be up all night ruminating about all the things that I perceived that had gone wrong. I didn't want to tell my manager. I didn't want to ask for help because I didn't want to be seen as though I didn't know what I was doing. So I sought out acting lessons. Now, I have absolutely zero inclination of ever becoming an actress. It doesn't appeal to me at all. But the reason I went to the acting lessons was it pushed me out of my comfort zone. But I felt as though I was in a safe place because I was amongst strangers. So I could be myself and be free. And the acting lessons were all about improvisation. There was no lines and learning your lines. It was all about being on the spot and snapping your fingers and just turning into this new person. And I thought, I can do this in work. I can be this new person when I go into these board meetings. So before I even became a coach and knew what visualization was or knew anything really about it, I started to visualize, okay, who do I want to be when I walk into these board meetings? What do I want to look like? What do I want to say? How do I want to feel? How do I want people to respond to me? And I would literally map everything out. I even went into the boardroom when it was empty before the meeting so I could figure out how the coffee machine worked. Because one of the most nerve-wracking parts of going into the board meeting was everyone helps themselves to tea or coffee, and this coffee machine was so complex, and I thought, I'm just going to look all fingers and thumbs. So I even practiced that element of the meeting. I bought myself a new dress and a new pair of shoes, which I still have to this day. It's a little bit tight, but I can just about squeeze into it. But that dress and those shoes are my anchor. And every time I put them on, it reminds me of that visualization of this empowered, confident woman going into this board meeting who knows what she's got to say. And if she doesn't know the answer, rather than turning into a big, hot, sweaty mess, should say, I don't know, but I will find out for you. And I did. Even as a business owner, even now, I still experience imposter syndrome. I have not been an overnight success in my coaching business. I have been coaching for 4 years. I experienced chronic imposter syndrome last year. It was when COVID hit, and it hit all businesses, and everyone was affected and everyone was suffering. Now, I was very, very fortunate. The January before COVID hit, I had had an exceptional month, and I had gained a number of corporate clients, and I had more work than I needed. So for the first 6 months or so of COVID, I wasn't really impacted that much. And at that point, I didn't expect things to last as long as they did. And I thought, by the time all the furloughs end and by the time everything gets back to normal, it'll be fine. It'll all work out for me because I've got this work that can keep me going for a couple of months. But it didn't, did it? We're still experiencing the impact of COVID now. People were being a lot more careful about where they were spending their money. Coaching, particularly personal coaching, was seen as a luxury. I had a lot of inquiries, but people were saying, not right now. I can't afford to spend this money right now. Meanwhile, all over social media, all these other coaches and peers were talking about, come and work with me and make 6 figures next month. Come and work with me and earn 7 figures. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm brilliant and an expert. And do you know what? This is the first time I have shared this fact publicly. I lied on social media. I followed the crowd and I pretended that I was doing okay as well. I wasn't. For 6 months, I earned £0. My earnings had gone from similar to what I was earning in the corporate world to 0. I went through my savings so quickly. I was really struggling. I was really suffering with imposter syndrome because I was looking at all these other people thinking they're still getting work. Why am I not getting work? What is wrong with me? Maybe I'm not good enough. Have I been faking it all of this time? In fact, here are some of my thoughts that I actually worked through with my own coach. I need more qualifications. I went through a phase of buying book after book after book. I went through a phase of researching more qualifications because every 5 minutes there was a new coach popping up on LinkedIn who'd done such and such course, and I thought, I need to do that course. But do you know what the reality is? I am actually a lot more qualified than a lot of the coaches out there on LinkedIn. I have a degree in psychology. I have a diploma in transformational coaching. I have been through the qualification process, which means I've done all of my practice hours and I've had a period of assessment. I am a qualified coach. I do know what I'm doing. I don't need any more qualifications. But the imposter within me was telling me there must be something wrong. I was internalizing what was going on in the market outside and making it all about me as an imposter rather than it just being a state of the marketplace and a position where everybody was. Why would someone buy coaching from me when they can receive coaching from XYZ person on LinkedIn? Again, I'm going to tell you a story about that in a future slide. I don't look perfect. So if I go back to the main slide here, that picture used to be my LinkedIn picture. It was a professional photo that was taken by a professional photographer where I was surrounded in rose petals. That was me at the highest point of my career. I think I just turned 40 and I was doing exceptionally well. That's not me now. We've all been in lockdown for pretty much 18 months. I've put on 4 stone. I'm a mum now, so I have different priorities now. I started getting the imposter within me, but I don't look perfect. I didn't want to post pictures of myself. I didn't want to do videos because I didn't look like that 40-year-old girl surrounded by rose petals. Who do I think I am? Coming back to my childhood, thinking about all those people who bullied me in school, thinking about all those directors who were in the board meetings that I attended. Were they going to look at me and look at what I was doing and think, who does she think she is? What does she know? All these thoughts consumed me. And I very almost gave up. For a tiny, tiny moment, I thought, I'm going to have to give up. I remember it was when I was having a conversation with my dad, and I was asking him yet again for money to pay my mortgage. And he said to me, you're going to need to get a job. And I thought, but I've got a job. And it was that moment that something switched within me. And I was like, no, I've got a job. I love my job. I'm not giving up my job. This is what I want to do. What got me through my imposter syndrome, as well as my own coach, was tenacity and consistency, not giving up. And boy, am I so glad that I didn't give up. I found out that one of those coaches who was seemingly doing tremendously well had a second job. So, you know, it was her choice to have a second job. But I thought, are you doing well because you've got a second job, you've got a second income, you haven't got the same risk that I have in terms of putting all of your eggs in one basket. There was another coach who gave up completely and went on and moved on to do something else. So you can't always believe what you see on social media. This year, 2021, this summer has been my best summer ever in business, and nothing changed, nothing. I'm still the same person, I'm still the same coach, I still teach the same stuff, I still do the same programs with my clients. It was just consistency and remaining there. There was absolutely nothing wrong with me. It was all external, but I'd made it all internal. So the 7 habits, the bit you've been waiting for, the 7 habits that you need to ditch to overcome imposter syndrome. So I've told you what imposter syndrome is. I've shared with you a bit about my story in terms of how imposter syndrome affected me. But what can you do about it? Well, first of all, why are these 7 habits that I've selected important? Well, all of these 7 habits have their roots in imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome itself is caused by our core limiting beliefs and societal expectations. It creates fears, doubts, and insecurities within us. And these fears, doubts, and insecurities in turn create unhelpful behaviours and habits. These unhelpful behaviours and habits in turn can create more intense feelings of imposter syndrome. So it's a cycle. Imposter syndrome creates the bad habits, but the bad habits can exacerbate and create more imposter syndrome. There are numerous of these behaviours and habits, but I've picked the 7 most common that I see in my clients to talk to you about today. Okay. Number 1, perfectionism. Okay, perfectionism is not about being perfect. It's about the need to try and make everything perfect. Perfectionism can be a means of overcompensating for your perceived inadequacies. So when you feel like an imposter and you feel like you're not good enough, your mind tells you that if you're perfect, that will make up for those inadequacies. It's a means of justifying to yourself that you are not good enough. Perfectionism has its place on some occasions. If you think of a brain surgeon, for example, we would want a brain surgeon to be perfect. Okay, we wouldn't want a brain surgeon who's operating on us to make any mistakes. But on other occasions, perfectionism can prevent you from completing your tasks at hand. When I was experiencing imposter syndrome in my business last year, I was trying to be a perfect coach, or what I perceived to be a perfect coach. And if I didn't just get out there and keep being me, I wouldn't be where I am now. Do you beat yourself up for every tiny mistake you make? If the answer is yes, then you may be experiencing perfectionism. Habit number 2, people pleasing. People pleasing is when you put the perceived needs of others before yourself to your own detriment. Whilst this doesn't exclusively affect women, it is particularly common for women to experience people pleasing, and that's because we're taught at a very young age to please others. To some extent, people pleasing can serve you well in your early career because you can be seen to be helpful. What else can I do for you? Can I help you with that? Can I contribute with that? All good characteristics when you're early in your career, but it's unlikely to serve you well in leadership roles. When I worked in corporate, I was a terrible people pleaser. And I would go out of my way to help other people. I would spend all afternoon helping someone with their work because it would make me feel good. It would make me think I was helpful. But then I wouldn't get my work done. So it was to my detriment. My boss didn't care that I'd helped such and such do such and such. All they cared about was my outputs and why I hadn't delivered what I hadn't delivered. People pleasing comes from the fear of letting people down and the fear of making others unhappy, even for a short period of time. People pleasing also comes from our innate trait to be liked. It's all part of our pack mentality and our need to fit in. That's certainly where people pleasing showed up for me. Back to my days being bullied at school, I wanted to be liked by everyone. So I was constantly trying to please everyone, which in the end meant I was pleasing nobody and certainly not myself. Do you often say yes when you want to say no? Do you struggle to delegate? If the answer is yes, then you may be a people pleaser. Delegation is a big one that comes up from my clients. And quite often, the reason why people struggle to delegate is because they don't want to be seen to be putting on other people. So they don't want to be giving other people the rubbish task to do that they don't want to do themselves, because they don't want to upset them. They don't want to give other people more work to do because they don't want to put them under any more pressure. Being overly modest. Quite often, when you suffer from imposter syndrome, one of your habits can be that you struggle to shout about your own achievements, or you may even struggle to recognise your own achievements at all. You see them as being down to luck. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Well, such and such helped me with that, or it wasn't me, it was so-and-so that did that. Even when it comes to day-to-day stuff, how many of us have been complimented on something we're wearing or complimented on our hair and we then talk it down? Now, so many times people will say, "Oh, I love your dress." And I'll say, "Oh, it's only from Primark," or "Oh, it's last season." Like, what does it matter? You can accept the compliment and say, "Thank you very much." Being modest, I think, can be a nice trait to have. It's part of what makes us nice people. But failing to sell ourselves can lead to missed opportunities for recognition, growth, and promotion. It's all about being visible, even if you're an introvert like me. So this is something I have learned so much about as a business owner, in terms of, if I don't put myself out there and tell people about what I'm good at and what I've achieved and what I've done, then that will really impact on my marketing and the work that I receive, because there is just me. And if I don't shout about it, nobody else is going to shout about it. It's the same when you're working for a company. You might have heard the phrase, you need to be more visible. You need to be known within the organisation. That's all about letting people know what you've done, what you've achieved. Do you say we instead of I? This used to be a very bad habit of me when I was managing a recruitment team. I used to always say, we have done this, we have filled X amount of roles this week, we have saved X amount of money on recruitment fees this week. Whilst saying we was very empowering for my team members, it doesn't get you far when it comes to self-promotion. You've got to remember sometimes, actually, I did that. I did those things. I am responsible for those things. I am going to take credit for them. Number 4, procrastination. Procrastination is when you leave things to the last minute or don't do them at all. Procrastination is more than just bad time management or poor organisation skills. When we procrastinate, we are making excuses for not doing things. So it's either consciously or subconsciously we're making excuses. When I was at university doing my first degree, living away from home, my house was immaculate. I would be up at 10 o'clock at night mopping the floor. I would do anything but do my essays. That was me procrastinating. I was making an excuse for not studying. My excuse was, I need to clean the kitchen floor. I must have cleaned my kitchen floor pretty much every day. In the real world, who does that? Okay, I was a chronic procrastinator. But we procrastinate because of our underlying fears and doubts. Procrastination is a symptom. It's a symptom of something you're scared of, or a doubt that you have, or a symptom of imposter syndrome. To overcome procrastination, you first need to overcome those fears and doubts, including your fear of failure, which was mine when it came to university. Comparisonitis. The dictionary definition of comparisonitis is the compulsion to compare one's accomplishments to another's to determine their relative importance. In simple terms, comparisonitis is the need to continually compare ourselves to others less favourably. So it's more than just market research. It's more than just going on social media to check out what your competitors are doing. When you are comparing yourself with others, you are never comparing like for like. We all have different stories. We all have different journeys. We are all unique. We are all seeing things from a different perspective, from a different lens. Comparison can fuel our negative self-talk. I'll cover that in the next habit, but just looking at my experience of imposter syndrome during COVID, comparing myself to other people. If you look hard enough, you will always find something that someone else is doing better than you. So my story about comparing myself to one of my competitors. I was doing a bit of market research, or so I was telling myself, checking out what other coaches were doing. And this was at a time when I called myself the confidence coach, before I called myself the rebranded to the self-sabotage coach. And I came across confidence coach. In fact, I came across lots of confidence coaches. One of the reasons I changed the name was because everybody was using it. And I was following this other confidence coach on social media, and I was thinking, oh my God, you are brilliant. And I was obsessed with this girl. I was following her social media accounts. I was looking at her website. I was comparing her website to mine. I was watching her videos, and it was fueling my imposter syndrome. And then out of the blue, I got an email, and I saw her name pop up at my messages. And I thought, oh no, she's caught me out. She's going to say, why are you stalking me, Tanya? Why are you constantly looking at my website? Why are you constantly watching me on LinkedIn? Stop stalking me, Tanya. But no, the reason that she was getting in touch with me was because she wanted coaching from me. So that was my biggest lesson ever about comparing yourself for others. You are never comparing like for like. It fuels your self-doubt, and it's not rational thinking. And that really snapped me back into reality. I was like, what? You want coaching from me? Oh my goodness. Like, you know, I've been comparing myself to you for so long, and you have been doing exactly the same thing to me. Habit number 6, negative self-talk. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I don't know enough. I always mess up. Everyone else is better than me. I can't do that. These are all examples of negative self-talk that keeps us stuck in a fixed mindset. There are 2 ways to overcome negative self-talk. You can challenge and reframe your thinking, or you can be aware of cognitive distortions in the language that you use. I.e., always, everyone, can't. So I always mess up. Always is a dangerous word. Is it true that you always mess up, or is it a case of I messed up that one time? Everyone else is better than you. Is that true? Or is it that some people might be better than you, but certainly not everyone? Negative self-talk is our mind voicing doubt. Our doubts come from our thoughts come from our core beliefs. Next time you have a negative thought, ask yourself, what evidence is there for this thought? And what evidence is there against this thought? And then use that information to come up with a new, balanced, more rational thought. Just because you think something does not make it true. Challenging and reframing negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, fears and insecurities is covered in loads more detail in all of my coaching programs. So, final habit, number 7, lack of self-care. We all know self-care is important, okay? It's important for so many reasons. But so many of my clients that come to me showing signs of imposter syndrome are exhausted. This is quite often because they've been working extra hard and longer hours to compensate for their perceived inadequacies. And this leads them to be burnt out. But when you're exhausted and burnt out, it's harder to think clearly. So that negative self-talk creeps in even more. That imposter syndrome creeps in even more. So it's a cycle. Lack of self-care can cause you to stop thinking clearly, which can create imposter syndrome, which can then create even more self-care, lack of self-care. It goes round and round and round. All of these habits are a cycle. And it's about breaking that cycle. When you start to look after yourself and put yourself first, then you can start to think more clearly. So we all know that self-care is important, but let me ask you, how regularly do you make it a priority? Okay, so that's my 7 habits that you need to ditch to overcome imposter syndrome. If any of this resonated with you, but you're feeling like you need that little bit more support, I offer a 3-step imposter intensive program. And during that program, we have a session where we look at your limiting beliefs, and I teach you my secret formula for overcoming those limiting beliefs behind your imposter syndrome. We have a habit transformer session where we look at what habits you may be experiencing, which of those are helpful and which of those are unhelpful for you, and how you can break those habits without changing who you are within. We then have an action taker session where we focus on your goals and your future planning. So now that you've overcome this imposter syndrome, what are you going to do next? Where has imposter syndrome been holding you back in your career? Has it prevented you from going forward for a new job? Has it prevented you from going forward for a promotion? Has it prevented you from speaking up in meetings? Now that you have this newfound confidence and you've let go of this imposter syndrome, what are you going to do? So we'll work on that, and we'll work on creating an action plan to help you move forward without any procrastination. Okay, if you would like to find out more, feel free to reach out. My contact details are there. You can send a message now on the comments. You can send a message to me later, or you can come and find me on LinkedIn, which is where I pretty much live. But I'd love to support you in your journey to become an imposter syndrome survivor like myself. So that's me. I think I'm just about on time for the 45 minutes. A lot of information for you to take in. Thank you for listening. We will be sharing the slides with you and the recording, so you can listen again and go through the slides. Do reach out to me if you have any questions. But thank you all very much for spending your lunch with me, and I'll hand you back to Mandy.
Thank you, Tanya. You've highlighted some really interesting points there that I can really identify with. I'm conscious of time and that our attendees need time to grab some lunch, so Tanya will, as she mentioned, pick up your questions directly with you. Our next Women in Planning Lunch Bite webinar will be held on Monday, the 8th of November 2021 on World Town Planning Day, and our guest speaker will be Nicola Gooch, a planning partner at Irwin Mitchell Solicitors. Keep your eyes peeled on LinkedIn when the tickets will go live. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you everyone.